sexual act consists of three motor responses: erection, emission, and ejaculation. In this video, I'm going to tell you how these three motor responses occur. Hey everyone, welcome back to HM Learnings. I'm Harshita, the creator of HM Learnings, where students come to clear their concept and to get the study material. Make sure that you have subscribed my channel. So today we are back with another video on the reproductive system, that is about the male sexual act. So the male sexual act consists of three motor responses, that is erection, emission, and ejaculation. And the important point to remember about the male sexual act is that it's a spinal reflex. So as if you remember the videos on the reflex, you know already reflex is a stereotypical, predictable and involuntary response to a particular sensory stimulation. And here also the male sexual act is a spinal reflex. But as I said in the reflex video also, that reflexes are something which can be modified, which can be modulated by the inputs coming from the higher centers. The same is true for the male sexual act also. Another very interesting point about the male sexual act is that it's something which is an orderly reflex response to sexual stimulation. So as I said, it is involving three motor responses: erection, emission, and ejaculation. This is happening in an order. So first erection, then followed by emission, and then ejaculation. So it's an order. The responses are happening in an order to the sexual stimulation. So another point, this I already discussed with you, that it is a spinal reflex which can be modified by descending inputs from the higher brain areas. Now as I said, that it's a response, it's a motor response which is happening to the sexual stimulation. Now what is the stimulation, what kind of stimuli can elicitate the sexual act, is something we can further talk about. So now the first, like it is broadly classified into the two types: sensory stimulus and the psychic stimulus. So sensory stimulus is something which is being carried from the skin, from the peripheral end organs, which are the receptors. So like glans penis is something which is a tip of the penis, which is the most sensitive part of the male reproductive system. So the tactile sensations from that part can elicitate the male sexual act. The areas adjacent to penis, that is the scrotum, perineal structures, the internal structures as well, like urethra, bladder, prostate. So in the case of the absence of sexual activity for a very longer time, in that case also the internal structures, they can take the sensory stimulus, the sensory nerves, to the spinal cord, and then they can bring about this reflex response. And psychic stimulation, like thinking, sight, dreaming, even imagination, can cause the or can lead to the male sexual act. As well as, if you know that there is nocturnal emissions, which is a kind of a response which happens in the rapid eye movement sleep, is also something which is stimulated by the psychic stimulation. So after discussing about the stimulus, we can go and talk about the stages of the male sexual act, or basically the three motor responses one by one. So the first event which happens after the stimulation is the erection. So it is a first response after the stimulation. And what is erection? So normally, in absence of any sexual stimulation, the penis remains in the flaccid state. But when there is sexual stimulation, or a stimulation that can trigger the male sexual act, ultimately the penis will change its state from the flaccid state to the erect state, and there is increase in the rigidity and the volume of the penis. So there is enlargement, there is increase in rigidity, and there is increase in the volume of the penis. The degree of erection is proportional to the degree of stimulation. So it is based on the principle of coding, that more the stimulation, more will be the amplitude of the receptive potential, and more will be the frequency of the action potential. Ultimately, more will be the response. So more erect will be the penis, or it will remain erect for a longer duration. Then, as I said, it is basically a reflex. All of these events, erection, emission, and ejaculation, all three of them are the spinal reflex individually also. So we will talk about these events in a way we have talked about the other reflexes. So in the same manner, I have prepared the slides for this video also. So it's a neurovascular event. So neurovascular event is I will explain it further, that what is neurovascular event. Then as I said, we will discuss it in the form of in the form of a reflex. So stimulus here for the erection, which is a motor response. It could be a touch, which we have already discussed in the previous slide. Psychic stimulation, and or both also could be the stimulation. Then the efferent is going to be the dorsal nerve of penis. So here the sensory sensations from the area adjacent to penis, and as well as from the penis and from the internal structures, is the sensory branch of the pudendal nerve, which is a dorsal nerve of penis. It will carry the sensations to the dorsal root and ultimately to the lumbar and the sacral spinal cord. So in the case of the erection is mainly a parasympathetic action. So in the case of the male sexual act or the male sexual behavior, the autonomic nervous system plays very important role, both parasympathetic and sympathetic. So erection is mainly a parasympathetic function. So it goes to sacral spinal cord, because we know that the parasympathetic system, the preganglionic neurons, their nerve bodies are present in the cranium, in the cranial spinal cord, or in the cranium part, or in the sacral spinal cord. So the parasympathetic part arising from the sacral spinal cord, and the lumbar part is also involved, which is a sympathetic system. So both sympathetic and parasympathetic are involved in the erection, but it is mainly a parasympathetic one. Major contribution is by the parasympathetic. So as I said, the efferents majorly it is mediated by the parasympathetic nerves, which are arising from the sacral cord, and they will pass through the pelvic nerves. That is, through the pelvic nerves, the preganglionic parasympathetic nerve fibers will pass. They will synapse in the pelvic plexus, and from there the postganglionic parasympathetic fibers will pass, and they will form the cavernosus branches to the erectile tissue of penis. So they will ultimately go to the penis to do the erection. The minor contribution, like the efferents which are arising from the center, or to which the efferents will form a synapse, are also the sympathetic, which are arising from the lumbar part, and the somatic efferents also. So where does the sympathetic and somatic efferent go? The sympathetic efferents will go to the corpora, which is the smooth muscle cells of the erectile tissue of penis. So we will see in detail what is erectile tissue. And the somatic efferent is also there, which is a motor branch of pudendal nerve. So pudendal nerve is a kind of a mixed nerve. It is having sensory branch also, which is taking the sensations from the male genitalia, both external and internal, as well as it is having the motor part, which is going to the other muscles, which is the penile striated muscles. So effectors are what? So we have seen the stimulus, we have seen the efferent, we have seen the center and efferent, and now the effectors. So effectors are what? These are the muscles. So here the erectile tissue of penis is one effector, and another effector is the striated penile muscle, which is the ischiocavernosus and bulbocavernosus. So we will see first about what is erectile tissue of penis. So if you see in this diagram, this is a diagram of a penis. So this is the base of the penis, this is the tip of the penis, which is also called as a glass penis, the most sensitive part, and this is the body or the shaft of the penis. So now the shaft of the penis is something which is having the erectile tissue, also called as the erectile bodies. So if we see, this is the cross section, if we see the cross section of it, so it is broadly having 3 erectile tissues or 3 erectile bodies, 1, 2 and 3. So what does this erectile tissue composed of? So erectile tissue is basically a complex network. So complex network of tissues, it is consisting of smooth muscle cells, which are also called as a corpora. So you can see there are 2 corpora cavernosa, 1 and 2. So there are 2 corpora cavernosa which are there, and another smooth muscle cell is present here, which is the spongiosum. So spongiosum is 1 and the corpora cavernosum is 2 in number, so they are forming the 3 erectile bodies. So number 1 is that they are containing the smooth muscle cells, which you can call as corpora. 2 is corpora cavernosum and another one is corpus spongiosum. Then another one which they are containing is the artery. You can see they are having the artery. So they are having the dorsal artery, which is the artery of the penis. Okay, and this dorsal artery, it is not shown in this diagram, but if this is a dorsal artery, it is further dividing into many branches, okay, which is called as a helicine branches. Okay, so these are further branches of the dorsal artery, and this is ending in the large cavernosa sinusoidal spaces. So sinusoidal spaces are what? They are basically the large enlarged part. Okay, so if this is artery, they are ending into a large spaces, and then from there the vein arises. So these are the sinusoidal spaces. And fourth part is that they are containing the dorsal vein also. So erectile tissue, here you can see erectile tissue is a complex network of tissue which is including arteries, the dorsal artery and the branches of it, the cavernosus nerves. Okay, I forget about the nerves. So there are nerves also which are supplying the smooth muscle cells. So smooth muscle cells are the corpora, and there are 2 corpora cavernosa and corpus spongiosum, and the nerves which are supplying them are the cavernosus nerves, which are containing the parasympathetic and the sympathetic efferents, and there are sinusoidal spaces and the dorsal vein. Okay, so I just show you the diagram so that you can see this diagram. So this is showing you one of the erectile tissue or one of the erectile body. So you can see here, this is the dorsal vein. Okay, this is dorsal artery, and this is the nerve, dorsal nerve. So you can see this is the central artery from which the branches arising, helicine arteries. These are the large sinusoidal spaces in which it is emptying, and from these large sinusoidal spaces the dorsal vein branches are arising and emptying into the dorsal vein. And this part, which is this part, you can see this part in between the sinusoids are containing the smooth muscle cells. Okay, so this is about the erectile tissues, and also there are nerves, the nerves branches which are supplying the blood vessels, and they are also supplying the smooth muscle cells, that is the corpora. So this is the erectile tissue of the penis. Now we can see that another effector is a striated penile muscle, which is the ischiocavernosus and bulbocavernosus. So in this diagram you can see this is your bulbocavernosus, which is surrounding the base of the penis, and this one and this one, these are the ischiocavernosus. So these are the 2 muscles which are getting the somatic efferents. Okay, so somatic efferents, they are the ones which are going to the voluntary muscles, or they are actually going to the skeleton muscles. Okay, whereas the autonomic efferents are going to the smooth muscle cells. So now after this we can talk about the response. Okay, so we have talked about every detail. Now we will see how this works. So first of all, there are parasympathetic nerves which are going to them. Now this parasympathetic nerves, as I said, erection is mainly mediated by the parasympathetic nerves. So this parasympathetic nerves are actually supplying 2 things. So if I again draw the erectile tissue, okay, so this is you can say these are the sinusoidal spaces. Okay, and the space between them is basically the smooth muscle cells, and this is the dorsal artery. So, and the branches of it are emptying into the sinusoidal spaces. Okay, so in the another way I can show you, no, not in the blue. Okay, let's take green. So green one is the parasympathetic cavernosus nerves. So these nerves are also supplying the arteries. Okay, they are supplying the arteries branches, and they're also supplying the smooth muscle cells. So here this is, if this is a smooth muscle, they are also supplying the smooth muscles. So they are releasing. So what are these parasympathetic nerves are containing? So that their postganglionic neurons are going to release the acetylcholine and nitric oxide. So you should remember at least nitric oxide, because this is very, very important. So it is releasing nitric oxide here also and here also. Okay, and ultimately what it is going to do, so it is going to do now, the parasympathetic stimulation on the vasculature is going to do what? The vasodilation of the arteries. So the arteries, the branches of dorsal artery, they are going to be dilated. So there are smooth muscle cells in the arteries as well. So they are acting on the smooth muscle cells of the arteries, releasing the nitric oxide, which is going to do the vasodilation. So when there is vasodilation, there is increase in the blood flow to the tissue, and there will be accumulation or engorgement of the blood in the sinusoidal spaces. Now this is going to cause the increase in rigidity on the volume of the penis, which is what? Erection. Another action which is also parasympathetic mediated is on the smooth muscle cells or the corpora. So they are going to do again the same function. Here also they were doing this relaxation of the smooth muscle cells of the arteries. Here also there is relaxation of the smooth muscle cells, which is corpora. And because if you remember the diagram, I'll again draw it. So this is again the erectile tissue. These are the sinusoidal spaces, and in between the sinusoidal spaces there are basically the smooth muscle cells. So I draw it in different color. So this is, if this is the smooth muscle cell, so if the smooth muscle cells relax, what happen? It will allow more blood to be get accumulated in the sinusoidal spaces. So both of them are going to cause the increase in the blood flow and engorgement of the blood in the sinusoidal spaces. Another thing is that, as you remember, I have also said that there are veins which are arising from the sinusoidal spaces. So from these spaces the veins are arising. So what happens? There is obstruction of outflow of the blood from the veins. So the rate at which the blood is coming is not same as the rate the blood is going out. So what happens? The blood will accumulate at that area. This is what is happening in the case of the erection, which is ultimately contributing to the increase in rigidity and volume of the penis. Now, what is the action of the parasympathetic? As I also said that there is parasympathetic, sympathetic innervation also. So there are three efferents which are acting in the erection. Number one is the parasympathetic one, which is the major one. Number two is a sympathetic one, and number three is a somatic efferent. Sympathetic and somatic are the minus one. Sympathetic one, it's not activated. Actually, there is decrease in the activity of the sympathetic nerves, which will lead to the relaxation of the corpora. So the same thing, that it will give more space so that more sinusoidal spaces could be filled, or they can have more blood in it. Next one is, what is the action of the somatic motor innervations? So as I said, it is having the minor contribution in the erection. They have a major contribution in the ejaculation. Okay, so as I said, there are two states of the penis, flaccid and the erect. Okay, erect is something when the erection has happened. So you can see what is the difference. So here you can see that, okay, so here you can see that there are sinusoidal spaces which are empty, which are not containing the blood. So during the flaccid state, what has happened? The parasympathetic tone is very less and the sympathetic tone is very high. So what happens? Because of that, the cavernous sinusoidal spaces are empty, because there is, okay, I'll one, okay, I'll use the laser pointer. Okay, so parasympathetic tone is minimal and sympathetic tone is relatively high. So what happens? That there is vasoconstriction of the arteries, so there is less blood flow, and also there is same outflow also. So there is no accumulation of the blood in the sinusoidal spaces. Also the smooth muscles are going to be in the contracted state. So you can say the space occupied them is more. Okay, now in the erect state, you can see that these cavernous spaces, sinusoidal spaces are filled with the blood. Okay, because there is vasodilation and also there is obstruction of the venous outflow. Okay, I'm sorry, this statement should be here in the erect state, not in the flaccid state. Okay, so this is about the erection, the flaccid state and the erect state. Now, as I said, that nitric oxide is something which is doing the major work. It is released by the cavernous nerve, which is nitroergic, because it is releasing the nitric oxide. So you can see that there is a stimulation, which could be the tactile, visual, auditory, or the cyclic stimulation, that can ultimately cause a parasympathetic stimulation, and it will release a nitric oxide. This nitric oxide will act on the smooth muscle cells. So it will activate the guanyl cyclase, which will convert the GTP to cyclic GMP, and this cyclic GMP will cause a relaxation of the smooth muscle cells. So another thing you already know. Okay, so it will cause the accumulation of the blood flow, as well as venous return is also decreased. It leads to the erection, and also there is contraction of the muscles, because this is going to activate the somatic innervation also. So there are contraction of the muscles around the base of the penis, which is being done by the somatic efferents. Okay, so this was about the erection. Now the second stage after the erection is the emission. So what is emission? Or before that, the male orgasm is basically including the emission and the ejaculation, which is a climax or the end point of the male sexual act. So first we see what is emission. So emission refers to the movement of ejaculate into the proximal part or the prosthetic part of the urethra. So the urethra is okay. So we will see first about, okay, this is the diagram. So you can see that I am talking about the urethra. So this is the part from where the urethra begins. So this is the part over which the prostate is sitting. This is a prostatic urethra, this is the bulbous urethra, and this is the penile urethra. So they are saying emission is ultimately leading the accumulation of the ejaculate, or the ejaculate is going to come in the prostatic part of the urethra. So how it happens? So again, as I said, it's basically a reflex. Okay, so reflex here, the stimulus is not the psychic stimulation, it's the repeated tactile stimulation of the penis. So that is going to trigger the emission. The efferent is going to be the same, that is the dorsal nerve of the penis, which is sensory branch. Then next one, here the emission is something which is sympathetically mediated. So erection is something which is mainly parasympathetic mediated. Emission is something which is sympathetically mediated. So here the preganglionic sympathetic neurons are going to start from the lumbar spinal cord. So sympathetic nerves, they are going to pass via the hypogastric nerves and the plexus to the genital organs. And effectors are what? Effectors are something, because as I said, now these pumps, they are being stored in the epididymis. So from the epididymis, the vas deferens arises. So there is contraction of the smooth muscle cells of the vas deferens. Also there is contraction of the prostate, so that the prostate fluid could enter into the ejaculatory duct and into the urethra. Seminal vesicle are also going to be the contract, and the internal sphincter of bladder is also going to be the erect. So we will see in this diagram that what is happening. So one by one it is happening. It's not that all the contraction of all the parts are happening simultaneously, they are happening one by one. So there is contraction of the vas deferens. You can see this is the vas deferens. So this vas deferens is passing through the inguinal canal, and then it is going to the inferior posterior aspect of the bladder. It will go to the posterior side of the bladder. Here there is a duct which is coming from the seminal vesicle. This white portion is the seminal vesicle, and it will ultimately form a ejaculatory duct, which will then empty into the prostatic urethra. So first there is contraction of the epididymis, also the vas deferens. So there is expulsion of the sperms which are present in the epididymis and the vas deferens into the prostatic urethra. Then after that there will be contraction of the prostate. So there is expulsion of the prostatic content into the urethra, and third, last one, is the contraction of the seminal vesicle, so that it can expel out or do the expulsion of the sperm and everything into the prostatic urethra. So first there was contraction of the vas deferens, then prostate, and then seminal vesicle, and ultimately all the content has come into the prostatic urethra. Now initially when the vas deferens has contracted, the content has come here. If I say the content has been come here, okay, so So the content has come here. Now what happens that after that, if the prostate contracts, what happens, the sperm will move forward. Okay, then if the seminal vesicles contract, the sperm will again move more forward, because they are leading to a pushing force, which lead to the movement of the sperm forward. So now the sperm ultimately has entered into the bulbous part of the urethra. Okay, bulbous part of urethra it will enter. So now this is the part which is going to trigger the ejaculation. So you can see that they are happening in an order, and one you can say that one is acting as a stimulus for the another one, or the result of the one is acting as a stimulus or a trigger for the another one. So this is what I have talked about, sympathetic stimulation. All of this is being done by the sympathetic stimulation. And then there is contraction of the urinary bladder, internal sphincter of the urinary bladder, so that there is no retrograde ejaculation, or the semen or the ejaculate doesn't enter into the urinary bladder. Okay, so this was about the emission. Now we will talk about the next part, which is called as the ejaculation. So what is ejaculation? Ejaculation is something which is called as a forceful expulsion of semen from the urethra. So we know that the semen has entered into the bulbous urethra. Now it has to be expelled outside the urethra. So ejaculation is that process, and it is something which is called as a forceful expulsion. Okay, then it is going to be stimulated by the ejaculate coming in the bulbous urethra, already explained. Efferent is going to be the same again. The center is the sacral spinal cord. The motor branch of the pudendal nerve is acting as a major one. It is not the sole one, it is a major one, and there will be contraction of many muscles. There will be contraction of the pelvic floor, then there will be contraction of the muscles which are present at the base of the penis. So as I said, they are having the major role during the ejaculation. The muscles of the hips, anal sphincter, body trunk, some of the muscles of the body trunk, and the internal genitalial organ also are going to be contract, and all of them are going to does what? They are going to cause there is having the contraction, which will compress the base of the penis, and it will raise the pressure in the ducts and the urethra, creating a force on the ejaculate, and finally expelled it outside. Okay, the contraction of other muscles with them is going to expel the semen into the deeper recesses of the vagina. So you can see here that it is being happening so that it can be ejaculated into the, you can say, more distant. So it is basically a forceful expulsion for insisting or facilitating the internal insemination. So this was about the ejaculation, which is also a spinal reflex. So you can see erection, emission, ejaculation, all of them are the reflexes. Now the next one is something interesting which we have already discussed, is that whatever is being ejaculated, or the semen which is being ejaculated, is not something which is having a uniform composition. So it is being if you see the fraction by fraction, the first 1/3 of the fluid which exit or which been expelled outside the urethra is something which is rich in the sperms. So if you remember, I have already said that during the emission, what has happened, that initially the vas deferens has contracted and it will expel its content into the prostatic urethra. Then there is contraction of the prostate. So as a result, the first 1/3 of the fluid is rich in the sperm, epidermal secretions and the prostatic secretions. But the last one to contract is a seminal vesicle, and therefore it is the last one to exit the urethra. Okay, and it will serve to wash the sperm through the ejaculatory duct and the urethra. So this is interesting to remember, and you should remember this because we are going to discuss it in the next video also, which will be about the semen. Now after the ejaculation, we have seen that it will start from the sensory stimulation, then the erection happens, and emission happens, and then the ejaculation happens. So after ejaculation, the sexual excitement and the erection ceases within 1 to 2 minutes, and this is what is called as a resolution. So this is the end of this video. These are the references from where I have taken all the content. If you want to know further or more details, you can refer to these references. And if you like this video, please like, share and subscribe my channel. If you have any doubt, you can comment on it. the next video will be about the semen. So till then, keep learning.